Hey you guys, this is Professor Vitt and I'm here to welcome you to the first of 3 parts for your paper. Now this is for Roswell paper part 1 of 3. This is your discussion section of the paper, and so what you're going to do here is you're going to learn the format that you're using to write the paper. I know oftentimes when you take an online course the discussion boards can be brutal, because they're usually pretty meaningless, right? You're answering questions that you're never going to use again, and you just want to get your word limit out there and then be done. So the goal of making this discussion section part of the paper is the format that you use in this discussion section is the exact format that you're going to use for the paper. So I'm going to briefly discuss what these questions are here, and then we'll go into greater detail down here. Okay, so you are going to be answering essentially 6 questions, or you're going to be making 6 small posts, right? Really one big post. But you're going to be answering 6 questions, and I have word counts for each one of them over here on the right. Now, I go through and I make sure that your word count is met, but I want to specify that this is just to make sure that you get the right amount of material. What makes your answer good is not the number of words that it includes, right? It's the quality of the words that you use. So keep that in mind. If you're at 101 words and you think, oh no, am I going to make it? Just, yes, you'll be fine, right? But you should be around 100 words. 50 words is not enough. 70 is probably not enough. So those are the guidelines there for the word count. Okay. Let's go ahead and rather than jump through these, I'll read them off and then I'll explain them below. I think that's the best way to do this. So first up, you're going to tell me what the claim is. Second, you're going to tell me whether this claim is extraordinary. Third, you're going to tell me what our current knowledge says about Atlantis. So what we know in biology, does that tell us that there could have been an Atlantis? Or is there something that we know biologically that makes the story of Atlantis unlikely? Similarly for archaeology, etc., etc. The type of evidence that you will be looking at is going to depend upon where your name falls in the alphabet. Okay, so you'll see that below. Fifth, you're going to perform a certain type of argument on this specific issue. So what you're going to do is you're going to conduct a reductio, and this will make sense to you when we discuss it below, but basically you're going to take the claim that Atlantis is really true, that this really happened, and then say, well, if I assume Atlantis happened, what else must also follow, right? And what the idea is, you're reducing the argument to what must be true as a result of its claim, and those ultimate reductions, what must be true on the basis of what you already think is true, will be something totally ridiculous, right? That'll make it just too absurd to accept that Atlantis was correct. Or Atlantis was really a place. Sixth, you'll discuss briefly whether or not the burden of proof has been met. And then seventh, you're going to respond to someone else's post 1 through 6. Okay, so here we go. This is your discussion cheat sheet. First, I want you to tell me what the claim is that's being made about Atlantis for you. So do you think, yeah, Atlantis was a place that Plato said was real, and it was in such and such a place around such and such a time? So this is going to require that you make sure you pay attention to the video introduction for Atlantis and also some of the links that I give you. Number 2, is this an extraordinary claim? Okay, so this is, here's the way to think about this. Claims can be either extraordinary or they can just be regular claims. Now, it's not an all or nothing, but by and large, the more extraordinary a claim, the more proof we're going to need to back up the claim, right? So in this case, a claim might be extraordinary because it conflicts with what we know is true regarding archaeology. So what you want to do is, okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to answer whether or not the claim is extraordinary. So number 1, you'll be specific. You'll tell me what the claim is. Atlantis was a place that really existed a couple of thousand years ago, right? Where is it and when was it? Those are important things because we're going to need to be able to look for evidence of this claim. So, is this claim extraordinary? Well, an extraordinary claim is determined by reference to what we already know to be true. So, If your last name starts with A through H, you're going to read a couple of articles on archaeology. When you're done reading those, you should have enough information to form an opinion as to whether or not archaeology tells us there was an Atlantis. So what you want to find out is, gosh, are there any archaeological remains from Atlantis? Maybe there's some unknown artifact somewhere from some trade with an Atlantean merchant thousands of years ago, and this is our evidence. Or maybe there's nothing like that. You need to take a look at those articles and tell me. If your last name starts with I through P, then you're going to be reading these two articles here, and they're going to talk about genetics and what we know about genetics and whether or not that influences our hypothesis or our claim that Atlantis was really a place. Now, a quick spoiler alert, the general idea here is, what is the received wisdom about where humans migrated from? Is there evidence that we migrated from some unknown continent, or is there evidence that we all came from the same place some number of years ago? All right, now last, if your last name starts with Q through Z, you're going to read these two quick articles on Earth formation and Atlantis. And what I want you to be able to tell us is, gosh, is it extraordinary to think that there would be a place like Atlantis based on what we know about plate tectonics? And so what that means is, does plate tectonics tell us that it's likely that there could be an island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and that island would then be destroyed through some kind of natural disaster, maybe get swallowed under the ocean, who knows? So, again, this is a course in philosophy on critical thinking. It's not a course on science, so I'm not expecting you guys to have a super well-advanced, detailed knowledge. Instead, you'll need to be able to do enough to evaluate those articles to say, gosh, is there, if you're A through H, does archaeology tell us that Atlantis is likely to be true? Or is there something about what we know concerning genetics that tells us Atlantis is likely to be true? Or is there something about what we know regarding the formation of the Earth that makes it likely that Atlantis is true? Okay, so that is your second post. Is this an extraordinary claim? Next thing you're going to talk about here is what the kind of evidence that's available for the claim. So, do we have any eyewitnesses that tell us they saw this place? Are these just stories? Is there any physical evidence? Do we have a coat of arms from the city of Atlantis? Is there archaeological evidence? Somewhere, is there a huge city that's been kept underground, that's underwater? Then you're going to answer, look, so this is, you're telling us what kind of evidence is available. Make sure you tell me, is the evidence open to inspection? Can anybody go and look at it? Is the evidence that we have the result of scientific observation, controlled observation, or is it just someone's observation? Now, once you've done that, you've described the type of evidence available, you're going to move on to applying Occam's razor. And here's what Occam's razor really means. The simplest explanation is the best. So, what's the most simple explanation for all of the evidence that you've gathered up above? Is it more likely that we've missed Atlantis and we're just completely dumbfounded, there's this huge new discovery? Or is it more likely that we've looked in lots and lots of places and we really haven't found anything? Next, you're going to do what's called a reductio on the claim. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to say, gosh, suppose the Atlantis claim is true. What would have to follow? And one way to think about this is to look at what you've looked at above. What does current science tell us about Atlantis? If there really is an Atlantis, then why isn't there evidence of their writing? Why isn't there evidence of the stuff that they made, right? If it's true that Atlantis really existed, then, is it really likely that an entire civilization would be totally destroyed without any evidence whatsoever? Well, no, that doesn't seem to be true, right? And the archaeology articles kind of, well, not to any great extent, but the idea here is, look, it's absurd to think that you could have that sophisticated a civilization around and not have some evidence of it. Also, when you look at how we understand the languages that are spoken in the world now, it's not like we have a big missing gap and somebody says, gosh, I guess this must have been a word from the Atlantean language. No, we have a pretty good idea where our words come from and how they've evolved over time. Now, the last thing you're going to do, you're going to tell me whether you think the burden has been met. If it's an extraordinary claim that Atlantis really existed, then you're going to need extraordinary evidence to back it up, right? So, now, those are your 6 posts. Now, I know that's a lot of talking for each section, but it's only 100 words, 100 words, 100 words. So it's not like a big crusher, just get something out there. Now, when you have done that, I want you to find someone else's post and respond to them with a minimum 100-word post. What are you going to say? Well, look and see whether the findings in your area of research disagree with theirs. So maybe you're going to maybe your last name is Adams, and you're going to respond to somebody who talks about something in genetics who has the last name Isaac. In that case, you might say, oh, you know, Mrs. Adams or Miss Adams, your discussion here about archaeology is really interesting. You seem to think that there is some evidence for Atlantis, but whenever I looked at the case regarding genetics and what we know about DNA and what that tells us about where we came from, it really seems to indicate that there isn't any evidence that we came from some colony of people out in the middle of the Atlantic or something like that, right? Whatever your research ends up finding. So whenever you are doing your responsive post, you're just going to respond to somebody who did something else. Does that make sense? Okay. Listen, you guys, this is just for the discussion sections. And again, the point of this post, the point of this format is when you write your Roswell paper, this is going to be the format. You're going to tell me what the claim is, whether it's extraordinary, what our current knowledge says, what the best type of evidence available is, da-da-da-da-da. Okay? All right. I hope that's helpful. If you guys have any questions on this discussion section, please let me know. You guys know my email, or just contact me on our Canvas page. Is probably the best way to do it. And I'm happy to answer any and all of your questions. Remember, this is gearing up for the paper. So I will be active in there on the discussion boards with you guys, and I look forward to seeing what you guys have to say. Okay, thanks a lot.